Today I want to talk to you about sleep and grief. And one of the specific things that happens during the grieving process is that some people find themselves crying in their sleep. And you're just about to wake up from a sleep or from a dream, and you might find that you have a tear or two, or you might find that you wake up and you're just full on crying from waking up. And this crying in your sleep and then crying after you've woken up can be very stressful, because it can feel like you're not in control of your body and you're trying to understand what was it about a dream or what was it that happened during the night that made you wake up crying. And it's not just enough to understand it, but there are some things that you want to look out for if you are waking up crying in your sleep and it's happening over time and consistently. So if you're waking up crying, waking up with the tears not only can be stressful, but now it can produce anxiety because you're concerned the next night about going to sleep and experiencing that again. For most people, if you're wondering, why does this happen? Will it change? What to look out for? Well, the why has to do with the stress of grief. The why has to also do with sometimes the loneliness of grief, when you are not only processing the fact that you've lost your loved one, but the stress of all the things you have to take care of, all the things that are required to get done, the things that you've had to learn how to do by yourself that your loved one would have normally taken care of. The loneliness, just really missing them, missing their presence, missing their company, missing hearing their voice. All of those feelings are being experienced during the day. But because you can't always process those feelings during the day, maybe because you're working or caring for others or just have so much going on, those experiences and those feelings will be processed in the nighttime when you go to sleep, because your body is trying to rest and so forth. Therefore, for some people, this is when their mind is most active, because they're laying down, they're not doing any additional activities. Now the mind gets more active. Also, when the mind goes into REM sleep, it can become very active. And one of the other reasons that you may be waking up sleeping is because you're still processing the trauma of the experience of loss. If you're waking up sometimes from a good dream, a dream where you saw your loved one or it was a memory that you guys had in the past, and you wake up from the good dream, and the shock of waking up and realizing that they're not there can lead to tears. The shock, or even experiencing the loss all over again in your sleep. Some people dream about the funeral. Some people dream about the actual event of finding out that their loved one had passed. And so that can also cause you to wake up crying or crying in your sleep. So the dream about the loss will provoke the physical response of tears, of crying in response to the pain being felt as you're experiencing this loss. And if you're wondering, should you worry about it, what you want to look out for are some key things. And those key things have to do with if it's unusual, if it lasts long, if it's a long in duration or long over time. And so now there are some other sleep disorders and sleep things that can happen, like parasomnia. There are some, things that can take place that are outside of the grieving process. And so those are things that you should look out for. So if you are having abnormal movements, if you find that that you're having problems sleeping every night, you want to start to record when are the nights that you woke up sleeping. If it's just here and there, if it's on occasion, if it's not consistent, and if it's not lasting for long periods of time, you want to make sure that you're not having night terrors where you're not waking up feeling just traumatized or feeling afraid or anxious. If you're having those feelings over time, that's something to look out for and to start to document, so that when you seek help and counseling, or when you get evaluated to make sure that there's not a sleep disorder, you have documentation and recordings of what's taken place, how long has it been, and what are the symptoms related to it, so that the professional working with you can determine whether this is a sleep disorder or this is just based on the grieving period and will subside or will dissipate as you go through your grieving process. So just to kind of let you know some key things to look out for. If you're waking up and you're waking up not only just like one tear, but you're waking up frightened, you're waking up having problems breathing, racing heart, sweating, that's something to note and to just kind of start to track and say, okay, do I need to seek help about this? Because is it happening for long periods of time consistently over a 1 to 2 week period? If you find that you're walking in your sleep, sleepwalking, and that you're mumbling and saying things and sleep talking, those are something to look out for. If you find that you're having sleep paralysis where you wake up and you just can't move, your body's stiff and it feels like something or someone's laying on your body, that's something to look out for. If you're finding that you're waking up confused, maybe you sit up in bed, eyes open, crying, you have trouble speaking, trouble just finding your way and understanding where you're at and the time of day and the place that you're at, and you're having that kind of confusion when you're aroused, when you're woken up, that's important to start to note. And then if you're doing something unusual, like just sleeping and finding yourself, eating things or walking around or saying things that are very unusual and very disruptive and causing you to be anxious, that's when it might possibly fall into the realm of a sleep disorder versus just waking up crying, just grieving, or versus something different happening in a period of time. It could be something more important, and that should be looked at, documented, and checked out. But you want to be able to keep track of how often it's happening, when it's happening, how long does it last. Now, if it's not doing any of those things, but it's just unusual that you find yourself waking up crying in your sleep or waking up with tears in your eyes, then it can just be your brain processing loss, and specifically your brain trying to make sense of what has happened. And so that has to do with dealing with the grief. If the dreams that you're having are causing you to have strong emotions, then the response of crying is natural response in reaction to that dream. Remember that in our dream state, our mind is trying to make sense of all the different thoughts that we're having, all the different experiences that we're having when we're awake. And so if there are some things that you haven't dealt with, that you haven't talked about, that you've suppressed, that you're trying to not deal with right now because you're dealing with so many other things, those suppressed emotions, those thoughts that haven't been sorted through will show up when you're sleeping. And that can also lead to crying in your sleep. And so it's your body, it's your mind, both trying to release the experience of grieving. Your body's trying to express it, and your mind is trying to sort it. And so if you find that throughout the day you're very busy, you're occupied, you're stressed, then what's going to happen is in the nighttime your body's going to try to process what's going on. You also want to look at, is there anything else that might be contributing to the crying in your sleep? If on top of the grief, if there's been some kind of change in your life, if there's been additional trauma, additional reasons for sadness, additional things that are going on that are increasing your stress level, increasing your anxiety level, or increasing your sadness, that can also contribute to the crying in your sleep. You want to make sure to kind of evaluate, do you normally have issues with sleep, or is this just an unusual thing that's happening now related to the grief? If you're physically exhausted, that can contribute to the crying in your sleep because your body is just worn out and trying to get relief. If you find that you are unusually irritable, finding that you're dealing with anger, that you are having a tough time going to sleep, a tough time sleeping, and then waking up feeling like you've just gone through a battle, and feeling your body and your muscles aching, that is not only the experience of possible depression and sadness and grief, But that also can lead to you crying just feeling out of exhaustion, out of feeling fed up, because you want to sleep but you can't sleep, and it's frustrating. And so managing those frustrating feelings, that feeling of helplessness, can also be contributing to why you're experiencing tears in your sleep. If it's only for a short period and it doesn't continue, then you know it's related to just the grieving process itself. If it continues for over 2 weeks, then it could be leading from sadness to depression, and that's when you want to get checked out. If you've recently had any other changes, sometimes we had changed our medication, or sometimes you might have increased your alcohol intake, that's something to look out. It can contribute to your mood, it can contribute to problems with sleep, and it can definitely contribute to crying in your sleep. And so you want to look at if you've increased in alcohol or drug use, that is going to affect your sleep. It's going to affect your mood. Your moods are going to feel like they're all over the place. It's going to not only disrupt your sleep, but can also lead to you experiencing interrupted sleep, experiencing dreams and nightmares in your sleep, which could be leading to the tears that you're waking up with. And if you're dealing with a lot of worry, concerns about the future, concerns about bills and stress and just life in general, on top of grieving the love of your loved one, this can also contribute to the factors related to not only interrupted sleep, irritable sleep, having a hard time going back to sleep, but again, can lead to the crying in your sleep. And so it's important to, number one, start to keep track and see if there are some patterns. Ask yourself, number two, what has changed that might be causing this for me? Because if you've been going through the grieving process but never waking up crying in your sleep, and now all of a sudden you are, it may be a specific time in the grieving process. It may be an experience that triggered it. It could be that you're overwhelmed and it's time to get more help. Maybe the things that you've been doing up until this point have helped, but now you're getting to a point where you're overwhelmed and you need to add to your resources, add to your coping skills, add to the people you reach out to. It may be time, if you've never been part of a grief group, to join a grief group. If you've never sought counseling for the grief, time to seek counseling for the grief. And also, it may be time to, if you have a lot going on in your life, to look at what are some of the things that you can put down or get help with so that you can make room to be part of their grieving process, so that you can make room to deal with any emotions that you have suppressed. Make room to just take care of yourself and to minimize and reduce your stress levels so that you can sleep better, sleep often, and restore some of that lost sleep that you've been having. I want to close out with just going over some general sleep hygiene tips. You can find this from the CDC. You can find it from many experts on sleep. There are some key things that you want to keep doing or implement if you haven't been doing it. One, you want to make sure that you go to bed at a consistent time, that you're not going to bed at 8 o'clock one evening, 10 o'clock the next, and midnight the next. This consistency allows your body to get into a routine. And you'll see that as you form that routine sleep, that instantly your body will start to get sleepy at that specific time because you've built that routine. You want to be sure that wherever you're sleeping, your bedroom is not only quiet so that there's nothing interrupting or waking you, but you want to make sure that the space is dark because that will signal your body that we're going to sleep. You want to sleep at a comfortable temperature. For some people, it's having a colder room allows them to sleep. Some people, it's having a warm room that allows them to go to bed. We find that with most studies, they say having a colder temperature allows you to sleep better. But you figure out what the temperature is for you and you adjust your room so that it can be at a comfortable temperature. And one of the key suggestions that all experts have is removing electrical devices, removing your phone, your computer, avoiding alcohol, caffeine before bedtime, and making sure that the phone is somewhere away from you and that you're not looking at that blue light of the phone. For some people, becoming active during the day, getting more exercise, helps them to have better sleep. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you start to get better sleep.